Hi everyone, it's James Mawson here from the IMakeFOSS project, and yeah, thanks for tuning into this talk. I'm really excited tonight or this morning, depending on where you are in the world, to be speaking to Egor Dorichev, who's a talented young game developer with a keen interest in Linux and open source. He's recently released a game called Burning Night, which is like a roguelike game with procedurally generated dungeon levels. He's released that on an open source license with all the assets. So if you're handy with a compiler, you can just take all those assets and compile the game and start playing it. Turns out Igor's not just a game developer, he's also had a keen interest in hardware, microcontrollers, and so on. So yeah, let's get into it. So yeah, it's great to have you here, Igor.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Hello, everyone.
Yep. Okay, yeah, so let's start from the start. What got you interested in computers and into programming?
Well, it was the fact that computers, when I was small, my parents didn't let me to use computers or smartphones, so it was like this mysterious land that everyone else was in it. And until I was around 11, I had no access to computers. I remember playing some games and like on the friends' phones, and that was the most fun memory from those years. And then one day my dad showed me some basic programming. He showed me some website. I think that was Khan Academy or Code Academy, something like that. And that was like my first experience with the computer. And then I straight started learning how to speak with the computer in terms of actually making something. I started with making websites. I don't think that was the best start ever because it takes a lot of different skills. Like, for example, design was not my strongest back then, and I still do not enjoy making websites. But yeah, it's a useful skill to have. It helps to run well.
Were you writing JavaScript or?
Yeah, I started with HTML and added CSS there, then some basic JavaScript. And then we, with a friend in the school, were like, hey, let's write a social network and we will become like famous and well-known, and we will have no trouble getting a job because we will be like, hey, have you heard about that social network? That's us who wrote that. And then I started researching, and it turns out that there's a whole world of backend. I had no idea like how that databases work and stuff like that. So I discovered PHP back then. Back then, that it was the thing to write your websites in. And yeah, I dived into that. But then I was searching something on Google and I misclicked, and I found myself on an article about making a game with C++ and SDL. And then I followed that tutorial, ported it to a more modern SDL, and then after that I thought, why not make a game myself? And here we are a few years later.
Yeah. So you never really dabbled with like some of the more typical beginner languages like Python or, Scratch or any of those kind of things?
Well, I dabbled with Basic and with Scratch later on, like after learning proper languages. But I never enjoyed Basic. It felt really slow, and like I just didn't know what to make, and why I didn't find a cool project to work on. Like I saw people writing operating systems in assembler and then coding their UI in Basic. So it's an okay language if you, I guess, have limited software, hardware capabilities, but like, yeah, it didn't catch me back then.
So how did you first get into game development, and what kind of projects were you doing then?
Oh yeah, I told you about the article I found. It was like a space shooter, the typical vertical Korean shooter where you shoot enemies that come at you. It was super basic. It's like your ship, and I think one type of enemy. So it was written in SDL1. It used like super old stuff like BMP image format, and then it didn't have transparency, so it used that bright magenta color for transparency. I decided I wanted to upgrade it to the more modern SGL2. I did that. After that, I decided to try and design my own game. And I do not remember how I came with the concept, but the next game I made, I still have the source code for that. It's absolutely terrible. It's like two C++ files, and all the classes are in one file. But it's a top-down tank shooter game. It had a built-in like map editor. You could make your own levels and then fight enemies. This time it had two enemies. It had like a regular tank, and then after you kill 50 tanks, you get a boss tank.
Yep. Yeah, and okay, so tell us about your latest game, Burning Night.
So Burning Night is yet another roguelike. It's the market wasn't as oversaturated with roguelikes back when I started developing it, but it took 2 years. So now with so many roguelikes that everyone's saying I have yet another roguelike is like a joke at this point. But yeah, it came after I finished my project before that, a small game that we made with a friend under a month. We were like, it's weird to not have a project. Let's make another game. And we thought what we should do. And then we had a crazy idea for a multiplayer game where you like spawn in a dungeon and you try to find, like you spawn in different parts of the dungeon and you run towards each other, and you try to collect stuff like from treasure rooms before the other opponent does that, and then fight in the end somewhere. Well, that eventually came down to a single player game because I wasn't skilled enough to implement multiplayer back then. And yeah, it took heavy inspiration from one of my favorite roguelikes on mobiles. It's called Pixel Dungeon. It's also open source and free. It's one of the best like free games for Android.
Yep. And how long were you developing this game for? Like,
if you take the whole development time, we started in March 2018. So it took 2.5 years. 2.5 years we released this summer. The interesting part about this development process was that it was written in 3 different languages. Like we started with Lua and Love2D for a game jam. That was like three days game jam. We thought, oh, okay, let's make a roguelike. But then by the end of 3 days, it turned out that I've spent all the time just making the dungeon generation work, and then we had practically no game. And then I looked at the Lua code and I thought, Lua has no like proper class support. It has no compile time, error reporting, mostly like when you like it doesn't check if you call the function that exists. And I thought that if we're going to use that in a bigger project, that it would be a really big pain later on debugging what's and why is missing, because like half of the mistakes that could have been caught by compiler would go to the player. And like we made the previous game in Lua, and we didn't have too many issues back then, but the game was much smaller. So I say we, I mean I and my friend composer. He didn't do that, but like I choose to go with Java. I guess because that was the other language I knew how to make games. Then I've made a few text roguelikes before, but I've never finished. And I picked libgdx. It's also an open source game framework for Java, and started developing. And after around a year, we started running into a lot of issues like gamepad support and Java being really heavy and slow. Also, to run a Java game, you had to either expect the end user have the Java runtime, or to ship it with your game, and that meant extra 100 megabytes, and that wasn't acceptable for us. And also building like native builds was pretty hard with that, like packing your game with the JVM. So I've taken a few weeks off, and I wrote a transcriber from Java to C#, because I thought those languages are pretty similar, but C# would allow us to use a proper engine like Monogame that has proper gamepad support. It builds to native, and it also would allow us to release on consoles. That didn't happen yet, but we're still trying to find someone to publish us on Switch or self-publish. It's in the works right now.
Is that something you were just figuring out as you go? Like you went from one language to another because you were running into limitations?
Yeah, and I'm not sure why I did that. Like I'm thinking back to myself. It was a really bad decision. Like, just if you take it out of the context, yes, you worked in a game for a year and then you want to write it completely in a different language. The language that I knew really like poorly, but in the end it worked out really great. I love C#. It's much more modern than Java, and it's pretty close. So yeah, it was a good decision in the end.
Yep. And so, how did you go launching the game?
Okay, so we released the Steam page like for public in March, I think in March or April of last year. And basically for how it works, you have to sign up for Steam developer program. You have to fill out a bunch of papers like tax info and stuff. And then for each game you pay $100 to get like a slot that you can release a game. And you basically get a huge amount of checkboxes and stuff to fill out, and it's all messy and hidden everywhere. You fill out that, and then push a button for a review, and if the page looks good, the Steam will allow you to like show it as coming soon, and you can collect wish lists. And it was our main marketing focus to like spread the word about the game, get people to wishlist, because what wishlists do is like when the game launches or it's on sale, the user gets an email. And with I'm not really good at marketing, so we did pretty badly with that. But one of the best things that came out of that, we started a Discord community, and it grew. It's not big; it's still like 300 people right now, but a lot of friends came out of that we still are really close right now. And
was it was it always your plan on taking Burning Night open source, or was that something that you decided later after releasing it?
Yeah, that was a really weird thing from me again. All my work before, it was mostly open source. I didn't want to go open source from the start for this game because I was worried that if it gets really big and it's open source, it could hurt me because I'm not aware and I'm not sure how all the stuff works. And also Steam has some stuff about open source that you have to ask them and that you have to use a license that allows for commercial use. So yeah, I've been thinking about going open source for a few months before release, and I've given access to the source to a few people who I knew. But yeah, the decision came like in late August, I think. So a few months after releasing the game, and I do not regret it. It's nothing bad happened yet, and people have been digging through the source code, finding cool stuff, and then also it gave some to the game.
Yep. And it hasn't negatively affected how it was performing on Steam? Or?
At least not from what I can see, because of course I don't have a lot of data from like other games, but looking at my graphs, it looks pretty good.
Yep.
Like no major like oh, this game is open source, I can go and compile it for myself. It still takes a lot of knowledge to compile.
Yeah. I mean, I was looking through the GitHub page, and it's like if you're not already savvy with C#, it would just be easier to buy it from Steam. But I guess the risk you run is that if it got quite popular, somebody might compile the binary and start distributing the binary.
Yeah, that's what I thought. But you know what? Piracy was always an issue for me. Like, the game got pirated a few minutes after its release, so it was already like on all those pirating websites. And even before that, when we had just a free demo, it already was all over torrent and stuff. And then even before, when I made just free games, people would pirate and hack them. So right now, I can't really do much about that. And I don't know how much of an impact that is. I'm really curious about the data that I don't have, sadly. Like how many people use torrent. Like it's still a pretty advanced technique if you think about it.
Yeah, I think it depends. Like, how motivated people are to get something for free. I mean, I think if a lot of older people who work jobs, you just want the convenience of a platform like Steam or something like that. It's just, if you're working a long week and you come home from work, the last thing you want to do is click through torrent sites just to play a game. But then, other people have a different view of it, I suppose.
Oh yeah, I think torrent is used mostly by people who like really want to play the game but don't have money right now, or I don't know. Like I own a bunch of games on different platforms, but I usually rebuy them for Steam anyway because like the Steam provides the convenience of save data clouds and achievements and leaderboards, and it's just nice to have all your games like in one place, even if it's...
Yeah. Okay, and when I was chatting to you the other day, you were telling me you're also quite into Arduino projects and hardware, and you're even putting together your own processor. How did you get into that?
I'm not sure, honestly. I just met a few people who were into it, and then I thought, it looks so cool. Let me give it a try, and then I bought an Arduino and a breadboard and some basic components, some wires, and then After playing around with it, I wanted to dig deeper, like to try and make stuff without programming, to
Yep.
like it's an interesting task. Like for example, to make a device that uh, turns something on automatically when the light level goes down. Yes, of course you can write like one if statement in code and it
Yeah.
will work, but you will like Arduino is so powerful for so many things. Like it's an overkill to use it in most cases, and like even
Yeah.
using a small microcontroller, like a tiny something,
Yep.
still like an overkill. So yeah, I really dig trying to come up with analog solution, analog solutions uh,
Yep.
to those types of problems. Yeah.
Yeah, and the Arduino is really good for like interacting with the analog voltages. Where I think that's the big thing. It's got over something like a Raspberry Pi. Is Raspberry Pi's got the massive processing power, but
Yeah.
it's nowhere near as versatile as interfacing with all the electronics.
I think it's also the
So
fact that it's a bit more complex to program for a Pi. Like you, just the Python
yeah,
interface isn't that intuitive, and in Arduino it's just like one C call, and you have the value. Yeah. No, Arduino is
yeah,
for sure fun. For those who haven't tried it, you should definitely give it a try if you're interested in programming or radio electronics. It's like the best of both worlds combined. And it's really
yeah,
simple.
yeah. So has any of what you learned from programming with microcontrollers, has that helped you at all, like with your games?
Ah, that's an interesting question. I know for sure that when after programming for such a limited hardware, if you compare it like to regular home computers, like it
Yeah,
has just a few kilobytes of RAM, if I'm right, like the Arduino Uno model, and doesn't have too much processing power compared to any even super old computer. It really makes you appreciate uh, how much you can do with limited space. And then when I got back
yeah,
into retro programming, I started trying to optimize everything I could, like use the smallest data type I could. Like for example, if you needed a value that goes from 0 to 256 to 255, yeah, I before
yeah,
just would use an int in my for loop or something like that and never care about anything. But after that, yeah, for a while I was trying to minimize my variable space usage.
yeah,
Uh, but I don't know if it's a good thing or a bad thing. It's like it's a bit of a time waste, but maybe it would pay off later on.
yeah. I suppose it depends how big you're going to be scaling things.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. Okay. And so, tell us about your involvement in the open source movement. Have you always been an open source enthusiast, or do you kind of dabble in different things?
Yeah, it pretty much started with me um, installing Linux on the computer that we've built with my
Yep.
father. So my dad was a sysadmin back in the days. So he worked with Red Hat Linux, I think, and some other distro. But he decided to go advanced and install Gentoo. It's basically the
Yep.
distro where you install everything yourself and compile everything from source. Like you don't get any
Yep.
pre-built binaries. And so yeah, we had a lot of like debugging why audio doesn't work. Why? Yeah, I remember going every time I boot, going into also mixer and checking if everything was okay.
Yep.
And yeah, then it's just started to fascinate me that so many people put so much work into something this cool and they didn't want any money for it, or like it was open for modification that like you could take and add something, and maybe they will accept your work and like you've done something for everyone else too.
Yeah.
And like because it's Linux system, a lot of software that like developed for it. Like back then, not a lot of software was cross-platform from Windows to Linux and back. So most of the Linux applications were written just for Linux and were open source. So that definitely helped.
Yeah.
Um,
And so, what
and
distribution are you using at the moment?
I'm a bit ashamed to admit it, but it's Ubuntu.
Yeah, it's a good distro.
Yeah, it's just as basic as it gets. But I just stopped caring too much about compiling everything from source code and the
Yeah.
amount of times I had to reinstall the operating system because I've been switching laptops and hard drives constantly. So I eventually gave up and started Gent all the time and just
Yeah.
went with the easier option.
Yeah. I think Gentoo these days, if you're doing that, it's probably because you want to explore things and you want to learn. But
Yeah,
if you
yeah,
want to get things done, then yeah, Ubuntu's it's a very good choice, I think.
yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, what do you think the open source movement needs to do more of?
Uh, well, I really want to see the Linux market share like on the home computers increase, and I think that's only possible if some big manufacturer like HP or someone like that starts shipping Linux on their laptops like installed, because very small percent of people install a different OS on their laptop. Get it? Like most of
Yeah.
them just use it with comes, and I think Linux, like if you take Ubuntu or some other distros, they're pretty good out of the box. Like you don't need to do much configuring if you're not too picky, and they're really good for like actually doing work. Like all the software is here now.
Yeah.
That's maybe Photoshop, but then why pay for Photoshop when you have stuff like GIMP and Krita and NASA Pride? Uh, so yeah, I think it would be really awesome if they could strike a deal like that. Um,
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's not all that well understood that Linux is actually a really good operating system for or family of operating systems for people that actually have very simple needs with their computer. Like it's got that reputation of like, oh, it's good for developers, it's good for people to make things or to really geek out, and of course it is. But yeah, if you just want to write some documents and send some emails and do a bit of casual web browsing, it's in a lot of ways it's probably more convenient than the other options.
yeah,
Just in the way
it's
that
for sure
yeah,
it's superior in that sense. It's more secure and stuff like that. If you worry about browsing the web. Yeah, I think yeah, it has that image that you have to double and know what to install it and stuff. But really, you just
yeah,
burn the image into a USB stick and you're good to go. Like the setup process for Ubuntu is also very polished right now. You just check a few
yeah,
boxes, name your user, and you're good to go in a few minutes. It even installs faster than Windows. Like I had to install Windows by side with Ubuntu a lot because I do dual boot for work. Like some
yeah,
Unity versions that are older, they did not support Linux back then, and so to get those working, I have to boot Windows. And like Windows takes so much longer to install.
yeah. I think the big advantage that Microsoft has there is that for most people, somebody else is doing the installation. Whereas
Yeah,
if you're going to get into Linux, then you have to do it. And then, I mean, depending on what hardware you got, it can can be very easy to install, but I think it's just psychologically it seems intimidating if you've never done it before.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
And I think, but
Yeah.
you know what? Microsoft had the same situation like with the Internet Explorer. Like it used to be the biggest browser back in the day, and like
Yeah.
it came pre-installed back then. It's still pre-installed now, but people go through the hassle of installing other browsers. I think
Yeah.
how did that shift happen? Did people just realize that Internet Explorer was getting worse? I'm not sure
Um,
actually.
yeah. I don't really remember it too well. I remember Microsoft got in trouble for trying to force everyone to use it.
Oh
Um,
yeah.
but then, yeah, I've been on Firefox so long that I don't even really pay too much attention to the browser wars for a long time. But even
Hmm.
before I was on, even before I switched to Linux, I was still using Firefox. But yeah, but you're right though. It's if people are motivated to want something else, and if they're familiar with something else, I think yeah, most people on Windows would rather have Chrome or to a
Oh,
lesser extent Firefox. But they know what it is and they know how to get it,
yeah.
and it's kind of a it seems not like a normal thing for people to do, but um, it's I think a lot of the time they just wouldn't even think of Linux because it's just not all that visible to them.
You know
But
what? Actually, now I remember I had this thought that maybe if something released, like that everyone wanted, just released on Linux, like say, the next big game like Cyberpunk released just on Linux, I bet people would
yeah,
install the Linux just to play it. Uh, I was thinking maybe like the next game do just a Linux release. I'm not huge
yeah,
enough to make a significant enough impact, but that could be a fun experiment to have.
yeah. Okay, and before, what would you say to anyone who's listening who is looking to get more involved in open source?
Um, I think just start making something, make it open source. Like it's super easy to put it on GitHub right now. That's how I started with like collaborating on projects. I started remaking a game in Java, and I've posted about it on Reddit, and a bunch of people got interested, and they joined me. We like learn how to make pull requests better and how to like review code and just how to like we lived in different time zones, how to connect with each other, connect our ideas. It was a really fun experience, and also yeah, I made some friends there too.
Yeah. Okay, is there anything more that you'd like to add?
Um, I just want to add like an interesting fact that a lot of people like say that Linux is bad for games. But from my own data, like almost 30% of Bernie Night sales are on Linux. And
Yeah,
also from my own experience, like most of my Steam library runs on Linux just fine with even without Wine, like it natively supports now. So it's never been a big issue.
yeah,
So
I,
if that's the only reason why you don't want to switch, you should just try it.
yeah. I've never had any problems getting any of my games to run on Linux, but I don't actually play all that many games, so I probably that's probably partly to do with it. But
Mhm.
yeah, well, yeah, it's been great to chat with you, Igor. And if anybody wants to follow along with you, you're on the IMakeFOSS Twitter account at the moment.
Uh,
And yeah, where else can people get in touch with you?
uh, I think it has the links to me in the bio right now. No? Let me check.
Yep.
it should, and that should be enough.
Yep. All right. Well, excellent. Yeah, it's been great to chat. Thanks very much.